My name's Chris, and I'm the kind of guy most people don't give a second look. But in October of 2019, something happened that changed my life forever. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend, just a cheap coastal cabin, an off-season getaway, and a chance to finally spend some quality time alone with my then office crush, Riley. Instead, we ended up face to face with something ancient, something brutal, something neither of us can explain to this day. What followed was a night of terror, survival, and a kind of bonding no romantic getaway could have ever provided. This is what really happened. Back then, I was 31 and working as a financial planner at a small wealth management firm in Seattle. I was decent at my job, good with numbers, and okay with people. I also had a head full of trivia that rarely came in handy. I wasn't the outdoorsy type. I didn't lift, and I wasn't trying to be a tough guy or bad boy. I read a lot, ran a personal finance channel on YouTube, and planned to retire by the age of 35. Everyone at the office respected me, but I kept a low profile. I was the guy people went to when they needed an honest opinion or a spreadsheet that actually worked. I didn't take up space, not like some of the others. The office was full of big personalities, guys who flaunted their wealth, bragged about their latest hookup, and acted like they were starring in a reality show no one asked to watch, the kind who treated happy hour like a competitive sport. So when Riley, one of the few women there, started talking to me of all people, I didn't really know what to make of it. Riley was a curveball, ex-paramedic, smart, good-looking, recently hired by the firm as a trainee financial planner, and the center of attention from day one. A strange career jump, but she made it work. She was tall, athletic, full of scars she didn't bother to hide, and she carried herself like someone who could break your nose and stitch it up afterward. I think everyone in the office assumed she'd end up with one of the hotshots who worked out during lunch breaks, shaved their legs, and had more tattoos than a biker gang. They tried, relentlessly. She'd walk into the kitchen, and the whole floor would light up with testosterone and cologne. It was like watching wolves posture around a lioness. They cracked jokes, flexed, and overshared. Riley barely reacted. A polite smile here, a raised eyebrow there. She brushed them off like lint. With me, it was different. It didn't happen all at once, but gradually. A few casual questions about spreadsheets. Then she leaned on the edge of my desk to ask about tax loopholes and avoidance. One day, she brought coffee, said I looked like someone who didn't sleep enough. Then we were laughing about some awful client, and suddenly it became routine. She'd wander over to my desk like it was her second home, ask about some obscure trust thing, or start quizzing me on random trivia. I never knew what to expect, only that it made my day better. We shared jokes, sarcasm, a weird ease I didn't have with anyone else in the office. We shared a few hikes and a lot of banter and talked regularly outside of work. Casual, definitely not dates. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then, after about 3 months, we ended up making plans for a weekend getaway together. I still wasn't sure why Riley invited me, but I wasn't stupid enough to say no. The cabin was an Airbnb Riley had found for dirt cheap. Perched on a weathered bluff above the Oregon coast, it looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Brown shingles, a narrow porch, and a bent satellite dish hanging uselessly off the chimney. It had that rustic charm that could either mean peace and quiet or no plumbing. We figured it was just the off-season keeping the price low. Who books beach cabins in October? We had no idea what kind of nightmare we were about to walk into. At the time, it felt like a steal. Remote, quiet, surrounded by salt-bitten pine and the constant hush of the surf, a few hundred feet below. The kind of place you could disappear into for a while, which, in hindsight, probably should have been a red flag. We'd had to park the SUV at the end of a rutted dirt road, one that clearly hadn't seen regular maintenance in years. The road didn't go all the way up to the cabin. We had to hike the last few hundred yards on foot, following a narrow trail that cut through a dense patch of coastal forest. The path was uneven, the undergrowth thick, and wet branches kept slapping against my jacket. Riley, of course, made it look easy. By the time we arrived at the cabin, my legs were already sore, and I was sweating under my flannel. Riley gave me a grin and a raised eyebrow. "You're walking funny already. That car ride break you?" "Some of us weren't born with lumbar spines forged in fire," I said. She laughed and kicked the door open. It stuck on the frame and she had to lean into it. I followed her in, carrying our luggage. The place smelled like cedar and cold dust. A wood-burning stove squatted in the corner, and the fireplace was already laid, dry logs stacked with surgical precision. Outside, the wind was picking up, shaking the trees with a high whine, the kind of wind that got into your bones. "We've got about an hour of daylight left," she suggested. "Want to check the beach before the storm hits?" So we pulled on jackets and boots, and she led the way down a narrow path through wind-stunted trees. Everything felt damp. The trail was muddy, and my boots slipped once, earning a glance from Riley that was either amusement or quiet judgment. Probably both. It was early autumn, definitely too cold to swim, but perfect for soaking in the drama of Oregon's rugged coastline. The sky had that storm-lit clarity, and the air smelled like pine and salt. Every gust of wind felt like it could peel the warmth right off your skin. "So," I said as we walked, "why did you decide to stop saving lives and start saving retirement accounts?" She shrugged, brushing wet needles off a low branch. "Paramedic work doesn't pay, and I got tired of seeing people bleed out because someone else made a stupid decision. Figured if I could help people make better ones with their money, maybe it'd be a different kind of emergency response." Then she added, like it was no big deal, "Plus, I'm aiming to retire early and buy a 70-foot yacht. Just cruise and explore the world. Drop anchor wherever I feel like." That caught my attention. I glanced at her, surprised. "Seriously?" She just looked back at me and grinned. The idea of living on a yacht with a woman like her didn't take long to take root in my mind. The trees parted, and suddenly the beach was before us. Wide, wet, and empty. Huge waves pounded the shore in rhythmic violence. We descended the last slope in silence. Her steps were confident, mine careful. There was a sense of isolation down there, as if the world had narrowed to the two of us, the surf and the darkening sky. Riley turned into the wind and took a deep breath, arms stretched. Her wild auburn hair whipped behind her. I just watched her, the way she moved, easy and strong, like she belonged out here. I was the outsider, the desk-bound analyst with soft hands and a ton of useless knowledge. I had no idea what I was doing, really. Not with her, not with this, but I liked how she made me feel. Seen, appreciated for qualities most women overlooked. "You ever see a whale?" she asked suddenly. "At an aquarium. Once. Why?" She pointed ahead, eyes narrowed. Something big washed up farther down. Might be worth a look. A few hundred yards down the shore, a massive, dark shape was half hidden by mist and foam. Even from that distance, it looked wrong, bloated and still. A dead whale. Big one, too. I squinted into the wind. I couldn't make out details yet, just a swollen outline and the distant churn of gulls circling above it. But I followed her anyway, the sound of waves and wind in my ears, the storm pressing in around us. As we got closer, the smell hit us first. Not just the salt and seaweed funk that clings to most beaches, but something deeper, richer, almost metallic. It came in waves like the wind couldn't make up its mind whether to let us breathe. Riley wrinkled her nose but kept walking. I hesitated for half a second, then followed. Neither of us said anything, but I could tell we were both intrigued. I'd never seen anything that big outside of a museum or a documentary, and judging by the way Riley slowed down to stare, she hadn't either. There was a kind of awe to it. This colossal creature sprawled out like a broken god. For a moment, all the sarcasm and banter dropped away. We weren't co-workers anymore, or whatever we were. We were just two small people standing in front of something impossibly vast and very, very dead. Its skin had cracked and blistered in the salt air, revealing layers of blubber beneath. "Jesus," I muttered. "Looks like a sperm whale," Riley said, stopping about 30 feet away. "How long do you think it's been dead?" She took a deep breath, regretted it immediately, and stepped a little upwind. "A few days? Hard to tell. Could have been sick, or hit by something." I found myself staring. The sheer size of it was staggering. Close to 60 feet long, its tail half buried in the sand, its head slumped toward the surf like it had tried to crawl home. We walked slowly along the whale's length, stepping over debris and bits of seaweed tangled with bones and trash. When we rounded the far side, something caught my eye. It wasn't just a tear. It was an open cavity, at least 6 feet across, as if something had torn through the thick skin. The flesh around the edges was shredded, clawed in a way that seemed almost frantic. Gulls shrieked and flapped angrily, hopping in and out of the gash to snatch at wet entrails. The stink was unbearable, like a mix of old roadkill, engine oil, and sewage. Riley stopped dead. I did too. Something moved inside the carcass. "Riley," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. She looked up. "There's something in there." I pointed toward the hole in the whale's side. At first, I thought it was a piece of the carcass shifting in the surf, but then it pulled back, slowly, as if it had just realized we were there. Something hunched and covered in dark, wet fur emerged halfway from the whale's exposed ribcage. It was larger than a wolf, maybe the size of a grizzly, but far less bulky. Its frame was lean and angular, almost stretched out, as if someone had pulled a human body too far in every direction. The front limbs were disproportionately long, dragging and bent at odd angles. They weren't built for walking. They looked like they were meant to grasp, to dig, to hold something. Its back curved into a twitching ridge of muscle that rose and fell with each breath. Patches of its hide were bare, revealing gray, cracked skin that looked diseased, almost burnt. Its head hung low, the neck disturbingly long, and then it looked up. Its face, if you could call it that, was half hidden behind matted fur and raw sinew, but one eye caught the fading light. Milky, clouded, and gleaming like it didn't need to see to know exactly where we stood. The creature held something in its hand, a strip of flesh. It stuffed it into its mouth and chewed slowly, never breaking eye contact. The motion reminded me of a baboon I'd seen at a wildlife park once, cramming food into its mouth with eerie focus. But this thing didn't look like a monkey at all. There was no humor, no mischief, just hunger. Cold, mechanical hunger. Riley was frozen. I wanted to say something, move, breathe, run, anything, but I couldn't look away. Then it shifted, rising slightly onto 2 legs, revealing a sloped chest and a grotesquely bent spine. Its body glistened with oil and blood. The wind carried the sharp scent of decay mixed with something primal and hot. Sweat, maybe, or musk. "Back away," Riley whispered. "Don't run." We began to step backward, slowly. The creature blinked, or twitched. Then it stepped forward, out of the whale. It didn't charge, not right away. It walked, limped, almost. Its gait was lopsided, as though one hip didn't quite work right. But it was fast, faster than it looked. "Now run," Riley said. We ran. The sand made it worse. Every step slipped, dragged us back. Riley surged ahead, her legs pumping hard. I stumbled once, nearly went down. My foot struck something, a half-buried log, and I caught myself with my hands, scraping my palms open. Behind us, I heard the creature howl, a warped, ragged sound that didn't quite match anything I'd ever heard in the wild. Then came the sound of limbs hitting sand. Not a steady run, but a galloping, uneven rhythm, like something struggling to decide if it was running on 2 legs or 4. I glanced back. It had dropped onto all 4s and was following us, its long limbs flailing out in a grotesque, unnatural gait. The motion was jerky, almost insect-like, and horribly fast despite its awkward rhythm. It didn't seem like it was sprinting to catch us. It was just trying to chase us away. Then, just as suddenly, it slowed. It howled again and veered off, circling once before loping back toward the whale just as weirdly. We didn't stop running until we hit the slope that led back to the cabin. My lungs burned. My thighs were jelly. I caught up with Riley near the top, where she'd stopped and turned to look back. "Is it still following us?" I gasped. She shook her head. "No, it's back at the whale." "What in God's name was that?" I don't know exactly. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I have an idea. Let's get back to the cabin, then we'll talk. We made our way back to the cabin without speaking further about the creature. Once inside, I bolted the door, then stood there shaking with adrenaline. Riley moved like she was on autopilot. She dropped her bag by the fireplace, checked the windows, then lit a second lantern. It was getting dark outside. We peeled off our jackets and muddy boots just inside the door, shedding our layers like we were trying to escape more than just the cold. Neither of us spoke as we stepped into the shower one after the other, rinsing off sand, sweat, and the reek of death that clung to our skin. By the time we made it back to the main room, the fire had caught properly, casting a flickering glow across the cabin walls. We settled down on the two-seater sofa in front of the fireplace, still damp and a little raw from the shower. The fire popped softly, casting shifting light over the wooden walls. Riley dropped down beside me without a word, tucked her legs under the blanket, and leaned into me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her head settled against my shoulder, and for a second, I froze, unsure whether to move, speak, or just sit there like an idiot. After a moment, I carefully put my arm around her shoulders. She didn't pull away. In fact, she relaxed a little more. Then, in a low voice, she asked, "What did you see?" "A thing," I responded slowly. "A thing inside the whale." She nodded once in agreement, staring into the flames. "It was feeding off the carcass, some kind of scavenger." She didn't say anything else. She just waited, like she wanted to hear what I thought. I rubbed my hands together, partly from nerves. I know a lot about animals, not professionally, but it's kind of a hobby. I've read field guides cover to cover, watched hours of trail cam footage. If it were a bear, I'd know. A mountain lion maybe, but the gait was all wrong. Coyotes don't get that big. Actually, nothing in the canine family moves like that, especially not with those limbs. I can't think of any animal that would look and walk like that. I have no idea what that thing was. Riley didn't argue. She just rubbed her arms under the blanket and said, "I know it sounds crazy, but I've spent a lot of late nights scrolling through cryptid forums. I don't usually believe half the stuff people post, but I've read about things like this before." She pulled the blanket tighter and looked over at me. "Incidents, scattered, mostly rural, Great Lakes region, parts of the Ozarks. People describe something big, fast, with a body that doesn't quite make sense, and always the same feeling afterward, like they saw something they weren't supposed to." I looked at her, trying to read her expression. "What do they call it?" She hesitated, then said, "Most people call it a dogman." I hadn't heard that before. "A dogman?" I asked, hoping for a more detailed explanation. She nodded. "Basically a werewolf, but not the Hollywood kind. An actual creature that combines features of man and canine, like some weird, unknown cul-de-sac of evolution." Outside, the wind slammed into the cabin again, harder this time. We both turned instinctively toward the back of the room, listening for anything unusual. Riley shifted under the blanket and spoke softly, but firmly. "We should stay inside until morning." I nodded, already knowing we were on the same page. Whatever that thing was, it didn't belong in these woods, or anywhere near people. Neither of us felt safe hiking out here, not with that thing possibly still lurking nearby. The idea of walking through the trees, or down to the beach, suddenly felt suicidal. So, there was no point in staying. "We'll leave tomorrow," I said, "as soon as the sun is up." Riley gave a small, tired nod. "Agreed. I'm not going back out there tonight. We're safe here in the cabin, so let's just make the best of it." Riley shifted under the blanket, then, without warning, swung one leg over and straddled my lap. She moved slowly, but with total confidence, like this had been on her mind all night. Her weight settled across my thighs, her hands resting lightly on my shoulders. My brain short-circuited for a second. "You really didn't pick up on any of this, did you?" she teased, leaning in with a crooked grin. Her voice was low but playful. I blinked. "Any of what?" She raised an eyebrow. "The hikes? The coffee? The questions about offshore tax havens I already knew the answers to?" "Come on, Chris. I've been throwing signals like flares." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She let out a quiet laugh and tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear. God, you're cute when you're confused. Her face was inches from mine. The fire crackled behind her, painting her in soft, orange light. For a moment, the horror outside faded beneath the heat between us. At some point, we ended up on the bed. The wind outside was howling, and it was raining, but inside it was warm and cozy. Riley was on top of me, her legs straddling my hips, her lips firmly on mine. We were moving slowly, almost reverently, the world outside the cabin completely forgotten. Every kiss was deep and hungry, but unhurried. After everything we'd seen, every beat of closeness felt like a small rebellion against the fear still pulsing in the background. Then I caught a strange smell. It was faint at first, just a strange undercurrent beneath the pine smoke and old wood. Musky, oily, rotten. My body went rigid beneath her. Riley pulled back a few inches and sniffed. Her brow furrowed. She smelled it too. We didn't say anything. We didn't have to. The alarm bells in our heads rang instantly. Then the front doorknob began to turn, slowly, back and forth. We froze where we were, eyes locked on the door. The sound was soft but unmistakable, metal shifting inside the frame, the latch clicking faintly. It wasn't rattling or smashing. It was testing, deliberate, curious, like it knew what a doorknob was and how it worked. My mouth went dry. We weren't watching some wild animal scratching at the walls. This was a smart, calculating being, trying to enter the cabin in a way a person would. We untangled our bodies quietly. I was on my feet in a flash, grabbing my pants and scrambling into them as I scanned the room for anything I could use as a weapon. Riley got dressed in a heartbeat, then began rummaging through her bag. The doorknob had stopped turning. Riley pulled out a can of bear spray and handed it to me wordlessly. I took it with a nod, gripping it so tightly my knuckles ached. She scanned the room for anything else useful, then walked over to the counter and grabbed a dinner fork. She turned it over in her hand and gave me a tight, humorless smile. It would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. The two of us, half-dressed, sweating from adrenaline and fear, armed with a can of bear spray and a piece of silverware. We were sitting ducks. We didn't move, just listened. Footsteps began circling the cabin. Slow, steady, deliberate. Then the sound shifted. We heard a dragging scrape, like claws or bone against the outer wall. A moment later, the creature began rubbing its body against the wood. The planks creaked and groaned under the pressure. It moved along the outside wall, brushing against it in long, swaying motions, like a bear scent-marking a tree, but with a perverse slowness that felt almost intimate. It was investigating the cabin, feeling us out, marking its territory or maybe claiming us in some twisted way. A second later, something smashed through one of the small side windows. An arm, long, emaciated, covered in black fur and wet, oily skin, with clawed fingers grasping blindly inside. The window was too small and too high off the ground for the creature to crawl through. Whatever it was, it had to know that. It wasn't trying to enter. It was hoping to grab one of us by chance. The arm thrashed and swept for a few seconds, then pulled back. A moment later, its face appeared in the broken window. It rose slowly into view, looming tall, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. One eye was open but clouded, milky and motionless. The other looked worse, overgrown, fused shut by a mass of scar tissue or some kind of infection. It stared at us anyway, or tried to. Its head twitched as if struggling to lock onto us properly, unsure of distance or detail. The muzzle was short and cracked, more human than canine, with broken teeth jutting at odd angles. Slick fur clung to a deformed skull. It didn't snarl. It just loomed there, trying to assess the situation with whatever vision it still had left. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I raised the can of bear spray and aimed it directly at the dogman's face. The effect was instant. The creature let out a distorted, guttural scream and thrashed away from the window so violently that I heard wood crack outside as it slammed itself into the wall, trying to get rid of the irritating substance covering its face. Then I made a mistake. I stepped closer to the broken window, the can of bear spray still clenched in my hand. The thing had retreated after the first blast, and I wanted to hit it again, to blind it, to scare it off for good. I was close to the window when the arm shot back through the broken glass with terrifying speed. Its clawed fingers lashed out and latched onto the canister. I instinctively held on, digging in my heels and pulling backward. For a second, we were locked in a tug-of-war, me and this monster outside, each of us straining for control of a small red metal can. Then Riley struck. She darted forward, fork in hand. She stuck it right into the meat of its gangly forearm. The creature screamed again, its voice a garbled, grating mix of animal and something vaguely human. But it didn't let go. It thrashed once, twice, and finally managed to wrench the canister free of my hands, dragging it back through the window. The fork was still stuck in its arm as it vanished into the dark, leaving behind a trail of thick, dark fluid smeared across the sill. Riley swore under her breath. "That thing is smart. It knows that was a weapon." I didn't respond. My heart was beating like a drum. "It's hurt, but it's not going to stop," I muttered. Riley nodded. "We'll have to improvise," she added, looking around the cabin. Then she made her way to the stove, turned on the burner, filled a pot with water, and set it down to boil. I grabbed the fireplace poker and thrust it deep into the flames. Within seconds, I could feel the heat seeping into the iron. Riley looked at me calmer than before. "We can't let it breach the door. If it gets in, we're dead. We'll have nowhere to go. We need to hurt it, bad enough that it realizes we're not worth the trouble." There was no bravado in her voice, just clarity. She wasn't panicking. She was planning. Riley was the kind of person who didn't wait for the worst to happen. She met it head on. And in that moment, I understood. We couldn't keep just defending ourselves. We had to go on the offense and meet this thing on our terms. I took a breath, steadied myself, and looked at Riley. "We can't wait for it to try again. We need to control the next move." She narrowed her eyes. "You have something in mind." "We lure it to the door," I said. "Wait until it's right in front of it, then hit it hard and fast. Together. Make sure it knows we're not easy prey." For a moment, Riley didn't say anything. Then she gave a quick nod and turned back to her bag. "All right," she said, rummaging quickly. "I've got jerky. 2 full packs." She pulled them out and handed them to me. "Bait. Let's make it count." Before we made a move, we checked the windows. We moved slowly, carefully, staying below the sight lines and out of reach in case the Dogman noticed us, peeking just enough to get a glimpse of the outside. The creature was still out there, circling around the window it had broken earlier, far away from the front door. We couldn't see much, just movement in the shadows and the faint scrape of claws against wood. But it was enough. The front porch was clear. Riley crouched by the door, one hand on the knob. I knelt beside her with the loose ball of jerky ready in my palm. We exchanged one last glance, a silent count. We wanted to scatter it so it would take longer for the creature to pick up all the pieces. Then Riley flung the door open without a sound, just a heartbeat, just enough. And I reached out and spread the jerky across the welcome mat. She eased the door shut again, long before the creature had a chance to round the house. We locked it and stepped back, holding our breath. A minute passed, then 2. Then we heard it. Slow, shuffling steps on the porch. A pause, sniffing. Then the soft sound of chewing. Riley looked at me and nodded once. I grabbed the pot from the stove. It was already bubbling over, hissing with heat. Riley positioned herself, hand resting on the doorknob. She glanced at me and I nodded. No countdown, no words. She yanked the door open. In one swift motion, I stepped forward and hurled the pot outward, flinging more than half a gallon of scalding water directly into the Dogman's face. The reaction was instant and savage. The creature shrieked, a sound that was part roar and part distorted human scream. Steam exploded in a thick white cloud as its dark skin blistered. It stumbled backward, clawing at its skin. That's when Riley made her move. With lightning speed of someone used to working under extreme stress, she reached behind herself and grabbed the fire poker we'd heated up for over 5 minutes. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, leaned in, and reached around the open door. The dogman was still reeling from the boiling water, clutching at its burned face. Instinctively, Riley found the one spot where the beast was most vulnerable. With a sharp, precise thrust, she drove the red-hot metal directly into the creature's one open eye. The scream that followed was unimaginable. It didn't sound like it belonged to anything born on Earth. The dogman stumbled backwards into the yard, flailing wildly, poker still firmly embedded in its eye socket, then turned and fled, bounding through the brush completely blind, colliding with every tree, branch, and bush in its wake. We slammed the door shut, and both of us took a deep breath. Neither of us spoke for a few minutes. We just stood there, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We could still hear the screams of pain and rage in the distance, but they didn't sound close. Eventually, after another 5 minutes or so, the forest was quiet again. We huddled up together on the queen bed, still dressed, the blanket drawn up to our chins. Neither of us spoke. We just stared into the dark for over an hour, straining to hear anything beyond the soothing sound of rain hitting the cabin roof and the constant hush of the wind. Finally, Riley spoke. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Even if it survives, it's not hunting again anytime soon. Maybe never." I nodded, unable to respond. The image of it blindly crashing into the forest, with steam rising from its skin and the poker still buried in its eye, was burned into my brain, likely forever. "It's done for," she said. "Let's just hope it was the only one out here." That part neither of us wanted to dwell on. Eventually, after what felt like hours, our breathing returned to normal. The adrenaline burned off. We collapsed into each other, arm in arm, still wide-eyed but too exhausted to fight sleep any longer. And finally, at some point before dawn, we drifted off. Now, almost 6 years after the Dogman incident, I live on a 68-foot expedition yacht named Second Wind. It's not just mine, of course. Riley and I live aboard together. We've been up the Inside Passage twice, cut across the Gulf, spent a summer drifting through the San Juans, and another anchored in Baja. We work remotely now, mostly consulting, although our respective portfolios are well into the 8 figures. In a twisted way, I'm thankful for what happened in that cabin. That night, that monster, whatever it was, shattered something in both of us, but it also welded us together. You don't walk through hell with someone and come out unchanged. We didn't just survive. We saw who the other person really was when everything was stripped away. I don't know if I ever would have found the courage to truly pursue Riley otherwise. She probably would have kept drifting just out of reach, and I would have let her. Now, most mornings start with coffee on the aft deck and end with sunset somewhere unfamiliar. The world's still dangerous in its own ways, but nothing has ever come close to that night. We never saw another creature like it, never heard about anything matching the story from that part of the coast. But we both still lurk around the various cryptid forums and YouTube channels. Not a week goes by without some incident or strange sighting somewhere in the US or Canada. These things are out there. Maybe they always have been. Almost every day, I catch myself wondering where they came from. Not just this one, but all of them. There are legends like this all over the world, every continent, every culture. Creatures that blur the line between man and beast. Dogmen, werewolves, skinwalkers, different names for what might be the same thing. The stories stretch back millennia, long before Hollywood ever got involved. It's hard to ignore the pattern. I keep hoping that, in my lifetime, someone will figure it out, that we'll find real answers about what they are and where they come from. Part of me needs to believe that this wasn't just a freak encounter, that there's a reason behind the myth, a science even, buried beneath the superstition.